It's 7:30 in the evening across India. I am Tanvi Taneja. We are live from New Delhi and you're watching DD India Global, bringing you the day's big stories from across India and the world. With me today from Washington, D.C. is my colleague Caroline Malone.
Well, good morning, Tanvi. It's 10 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. and 4 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, more violence in Ukraine following one of the most deadly attacks by Russia on Wednesday, and a debate over nuclear testing in Moscow. But first, back to Tanvi with the headlines.
The Pentagon says the United States will continue to foster stronger defense ties with India, calls China a pacing challenge. Jailed Iranian human rights activist Narges Mohammadi wins the 2023 Nobel Peace Prize for her fight against the oppression of women in Iran.
The Norwegian Nobel Committee has decided to award the Nobel Peace Prize for 2023 to Narges Mohammadi.
The death toll crosses 40 and over 200 remain missing after Wednesday's flash floods in India's northeastern state, Sikkim. And Indian men's hockey team beats Japan 5-1 to claim the gold medal in Hangzhou, secures a spot in 2024 Paris Olympics. India assured of 100 medals at the Asian Games. The Pentagon has said that the U.S. very much appreciates their defense ties with India and will continue to foster partnership with the country in this area. In a press briefing held in Washington, Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder said that the United States will continue to foster a stronger defense partnership with India. In 1997, defense trade between India and the U.S. was almost negligible. Today, it stands above $20 billion. DD India's Jessica Taneja reports from New Delhi.
Every year, Indian and American forces carry out joint tactical exercises. This time in Alaska, the two armies practiced high-angle rescue and casualty evacuation drills in the sub-zero Arctic conditions.
Hi, my name is PFC Donner from 124. We had a really great joint experience with the Indian Army. We learned a lot and gave them the opportunity to learn a lot from us on our side.
Jai Hind, मैं लेंस टैक नाना कलिता इंडियन आर्मी युद्ध अभ्यास 2023 में पार्टिसिपेट की। मेरे 4 साल की सर्विस में ये गोल्डन अपॉर्चुनिटी थी। इस एक्सरसाइज के दौरान यूएस आर्मी कैसे टास्क करती है, उनसे हमने सीखा कि एक टास्क को करने का ड्रिल कैसा होता है।
Last year, these training exercises were held only about 62 miles from the line of actual control. This, along with a string of defense deals in recent years, has deepened military cooperation between the two.
The partnership that we have with India and other countries in the Indo-Pacific region when it comes to preserving individual nations' sovereignty and abiding by the international rules.
Factor this, defense trade between the two nations went from almost negligible to over $20 billion in the past quarter century. Just earlier this year, US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was in New Delhi to finalize initiatives that will give India access to cutting-edge technologies and also support its defense modernization plans. China's assertiveness, coupled with America's energized Indo-Pacific strategy, has made India an indispensable defense partner in the region. And this is likely to gain further momentum. Jessica Taneja for DD India.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has once again commended India, stating that the country's leadership is self-guided and driven by its national interests. Speaking at the Waldai International Discussion Club in Sochi, Putin backed India for a permanent seat in the UN Security Council. He also lauded India for consistently registering a strong economic growth.
Certainly in the UN Security Council, such countries should be represented that are acquiring significant clout in international affairs, and due to their potential, they have an opportunity to contribute to issues. What countries am I talking about? India, more than 1.5 billion people live in India. Over 7% GDP growth, 7.4 or 7.6%. That is a giant in the world. Indeed, there are a lot of people there who need assistance and help, but nevertheless, high-tech export is growing exponentially. It is a ground power. It is becoming more stronger with every passing year with the leadership, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi.
Jailed Iranian activist Narges Mohammadi has won the Nobel Peace Prize 2023 for her fight against the oppression of women in Iran. With the announcement, the Nobel Committee chair also noted that the Nobel Peace Prize laureates this year and in recent years demonstrate that democracy is in decline. My colleague Caroline Malone is in Washington, D.C. She gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Caroline,
well, that's right, Tanvi. The Nobel Peace Prize winner, that Iranian activist Narges Mohammadi, has actually been in jail for 12 years. Despite that, she's been awarded the prize for her fight against the oppression of women and the promotion of human rights and freedom for all. Mohammadi is one of Iran's leading human rights activists who's also campaigned for women's rights, scrapping of the death penalty, and an improvement of prison conditions in Iran. And despite being held in prison herself, she's rallied immense support for the women life freedom movement against the government in Iran over the last year. Well, Narges Mohammadi was selected to be the nomination and winner from 350 other nominations. DD India's Stuart Smith has more from London.
The Nobel Committee describes Mohammadi as an advocate for equality and human rights, a campaigner against the use of the death penalty, and a leader of last year's women's rights protests against the government in Iran. Currently behind bars, she's been convicted 5 times, arrested 13, and in total sentenced to 31 years in prison for multiple charges, including spreading propaganda against the state. The head of the Norwegian Nobel Committee says he hopes Iranian authorities will release her so she may accept the award in December. Winners of the prize, who can be organisations or individuals, receive $1 million, a medal and a certificate. They're selected by a committee based on information provided by international advisors over an 8-month-long decision-making process. Mohammadi has beaten more than 350 other nominees for this year's prize. Her husband, who lives with their 2 children as a refugee in France, says she's the most determined person he knows, with 3 causes in life: respect for human rights, her feminist commitment, and justice for all the crimes that have been committed. On her official Instagram page, her family wrote that the honour of receiving the prize belongs to all Iranians, especially the women and girls of Iran who, quote, captivated the world with their bravery in fighting for freedom and equality. Stuart Smith in London, reporting for DD India.
Well, as you heard there, Narges's husband, Taghi Ramani, has said that the Nobel Peace Prize will also further encourage her struggle and the movement that she leads.
This Nobel Peace Prize will open a door for Narges' motives in fighting for human rights. It will make her fearless. But most importantly, this prize is given for the movement of Mahsa Amini, Women Life Freedom. Narges is one of the face of this movement that is receiving it.
Well, Mohammadi's win comes just a year after the death of Mahsa Amini, while she was being held by the country's morality police for allegedly flouting Iran's dress code for women. There's also been a stream of tributes for the award winner, including from the UN Human Rights Office, which has said the choice of Nobel winner highlights the bravery of Iranian women. Well, over 75,000 healthcare workers at the US healthcare giant Kaiser Permanente are entering the third day of planned strikes on Friday. Unions representing the workers are pushing for higher pay to keep up with the cost of living, a $25 per hour minimum wage for all workers, and a reformed bonus structure. But contract talks between Kaiser and the unions have been suspended as they're not making progress. It's the largest walkout ever in the American healthcare sector, surpassing a previous strike from back in 2018. Well, the US administration has approved the building of new sections of a border wall, which was strongly opposed by Democrats during former President Trump's time in office. Mexico has condemned the move, but President Joe Biden has said a law on the building of the wall meant he had no choice.
Building a border wall was a signature policy of Donald Trump, fiercely opposed by Democrats. In 2020, Biden promised not to build more wall, but he now justifies it as abiding by the law.
Well, the border wall, the money was appropriated for the border wall. I tried to get them to reappropriate, to redirect that money. They didn't, they wouldn't. And in the meantime, there's nothing under the law other than they have to use the money for what it was appropriated. I can't stop that.
Meanwhile, Mexico has rejected US plans to build new sanctions of wall at US-Mexico border. Mexican president condemned the latest wall plan during a meet of top officials of both the countries to discuss immigration and security.
This authorization for the construction of the wall is a step backwards. That does not solve the problem. We have to address the causes. It is contrary to what President Biden has said. He has been the only president so far who has not built the wall.
Apart from Mexican president, former US President Donald Trump took a jab on Biden government. Taking to his social media website, Trump claimed his victory and demanded an apology from President Biden over the latest White House policy reversal over construction of more segments of border wall with Mexico. Despite the announcement, dozens of migrants waded across the Rio Grande into Eagle Pass, Texas. They then surrendered to US authorities for processing.
Well, in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Moscow has launched new airstrikes on Ukraine early on Friday, killing a 10-year-old boy and his grandmother in the southern region of Kharkiv. 28 others were injured in the strikes, including an 11-month-old baby. According to the regional governor, the strike has also damaged grain port infrastructure in Odessa. The attack comes just a day after another Russian missile strike on a village in northeastern Ukraine, which killed 52 people. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called the attacks a deliberate Russian assault on civilians. But Moscow, on the other hand, has denied targeting civilians, saying that Russian military strikes are aimed at military infrastructure and representatives of Ukraine's military leadership. Well, Russia's Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu has inspected an aircraft plant in the Siberian city of Novosibirsk and has urged the industry to boost its output. The facility manufactures and upgrades multi-purpose Su-34 fighter bombers, which are widely used by the Russian Air Force for strikes against Ukraine. Meanwhile, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights has deployed a field team to probe yesterday's missile strikes on the Ukrainian village of Hirosa.
Now, what is clear is that the strike is one of the deadliest since the 24th of February 2022. But of course, it is far from being the only one. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, who saw for himself the horrific impact of such strikes, is profoundly shocked and condemns these killings. He's deployed a field team to the site to speak to survivors and gather more information. Before the Russian invasion, the village's population was about 300. It's not clear how many residents were still living there, but it's clear that with the high number of people killed, everybody in this small community has been affected.
Well, meanwhile, the Russian President Vladimir Putin may have hinted at the potential of resuming nuclear testing after top lawmakers said parliamentary leaders will propose revoking the ratification of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. A Kremlin spokesperson, though, has now clarified that de-ratifying the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty is only to match the US position and not to carry out a test. Russia, which inherited the Soviet Union's nuclear weapons, possesses the world's largest stockpile. DD India's Dasha Chernyshova reports from Moscow.
Well, that's right. We have heard the Russian president addressing the participants of the Valdai Forum in Sochi on Thursday. The understanding is that Moscow is certain that it will achieve the goals of what it describes as a special military operation in Ukraine. The Russian president said that steadily Moscow was moving towards the achievement of the goals that have been stated at the start of this operation, demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. He was once again referring to the fact that Russia is a large country and doesn't need more territorial gains. So that's why the conflict in Ukraine is not about territories. It is about the threat that has been posed by the Western countries against Russia. So that's why he said that Moscow is in Ukraine in order to stop the war that has been unleashed by Kyiv authorities against the residents of Donbas. The Russian president was also talking indeed about the use of nuclear weapons, the nuclear rhetoric that we from time to time hear from the Russian officials. He was clearly saying that Russia is going to update its nuclear arsenal. With regard to that, he was saying that Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile capable of carrying nuclear weapons will soon get to the combat duty. And also we understand that Burevestnik intercontinental ballistic missile, also capable of carrying nuclear weapons, has been successfully tested. So indeed, Russia is showing to the world that it is capable of protecting itself in the best possible way. At the same time, the Russian president has criticized the United States for not ratifying the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, saying that Moscow has not only signed but also ratified this treaty. But given the very fact that the situation is changing globally, Moscow could move towards revoking that ratification. And on Friday morning, the Speaker of the Russian State Duma, Vyacheslav Volodin, was saying that indeed at the next session of the State Duma, the lawmakers will be indeed discussing the possibility of revoking that ratification.
Well, a drone attack on a Syrian military academy in the city of Homs has killed at least 100 people after Syria's defense minister had just left a graduation ceremony there. The Syrian health minister has said it was one of the bloodiest attacks targeting a graduation ceremony attended by cadets, families and women and children. The defense and foreign ministries have vowed to respond with full force. Syria's government forces carried out heavy bombing attacks on the opposition-held zone of Idlib throughout the day. That conflict began with protests against President Bashar al-Assad in 2011, but spiraled into an all-out war that's left hundreds of thousands of people dead and millions displaced. Well, leaders of the European Union posed for a photo in Granada on Friday following an informal meeting. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz discussed migration on the sidelines of the EU summit in Spain. They expressed satisfaction towards the recent EU agreement on how to handle immigration at times of high arrivals. The two leaders will also meet again in a bilateral summit in Germany in November. A new report shows the ongoing conflict in Sudan is threatening to break down the health system, causing severe shocks in a country suffering a severe humanitarian crisis. That conflict began in April and has left just 1/3 of hospitals in conflict zones operational. DD India's Africa correspondent Isabel Nakira reports.
Escalating violence in Sudan has left hospitals to near collapse, a new report that highlights the implications of the war notes. The fighting has sent health workers fleeing the war zones, leaving patients stranded. The conflict has disrupted medical supplies and emergency services like newborn care, cancer treatment, and dialysis, further crippling the health system. More than 10 health workers have been killed, 4 abducted, while close to a dozen more are still missing. 70% of hospitals are said to be dysfunctional. According to the report, the war is said to have caused financial losses to the health system, totaling an estimated $700 million. Thousands of Sudanese have fled the borders to neighboring countries, and more than 3 million people are internally displaced across the country. Isabel Nakiria in Kampala, reporting for DD India.
Well, that's it from me here in Washington. Back to you, Tanvi, in the studio.
Thank you, Caroline. Have a great weekend. Caroline Malone joining us all the way from Washington, D.C. You're watching DD India Global. Still to come on this show. Poland refuses to allow new migrants, says it rejects European Union's plan to accept illegal migrants. And India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, holds talks with his Maltese counterpart in New Delhi.
How ordinary people in your country, what do they think about India? What is the perception of India? What is the popular image of India?
The Dominicans are also attracted to the practice of yoga, for example. This is a practice that is very popular there, and we have felt the benefits that yoga brings that are not just physical but spiritual and mental. And this really has become very popular in the Dominican Republic, and as also concerns the gastronomy of India, the Dominican Republic is getting to know more about it and enjoying Indian gastronomy.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. The Indian government is taking various steps to assist the northeastern state of Sikkim to combat the damage caused by the recent flash floods. India's Home Ministry has approved more than $5 million in funds to help provide relief to the people affected in the state. The Home Ministry has also formed a team which will assess the damage caused by the floods, which will help in deciding on any further assistance. Meanwhile, 2 days after the devastating flash floods in Sikkim, efforts are underway to provide relief for the flood hit and also hunt for those who are still missing. Thousands of tourists who were stuck in the flood-hit areas are being safely evacuated. The Indian Army, along with the National Disaster Response Force, are continuing their search and rescue operations. As of now, around 40 people are confirmed dead and over 200 still remain missing. India's central bank, the Reserve Bank of India, has decided to keep the repo rate unchanged at 6.5%. The Reserve Bank of India governor said that transmission of 250 basis point repo rate cut is still incomplete. While announcing the Monetary Policy Committee's statement for October 2023, the RBI governor said that headline inflation had surged in July, but has eased further in September.
Last year in the first quarter, it was 7.3%. This year in the first quarter, the headline inflation moderated to 4.6%. A significant easing of inflation pressures from its exceptionally high level in July and August is expected to materialize in September as the impact of fleeting food price shocks wane. Further, underlying inflation pressures are also moderating, while the impact of past monetary policy actions is still unfolding.
More from India. India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, today held talks with his Maltese counterpart, Ian Borg, in New Delhi and discussed trade and commerce, investments and people-to-people ties with the Mediterranean partner. They also spoke about cooperation with the European Union and Africa. And next we take a look at other stories making news around the world. Poland has rejected European Union's plan to accept illegal migrants and punish members who refuse to cooperate. Under an agreement reached by European Union members, countries that receive migrants could speed up asylum procedures and can ask for swift help from their EU peers. In Spain, police have seized 74 tons of stolen olives in Seville. 12 people have been arrested so far for their alleged involvement in theft and sale of stolen olives. Philippine Coast Guard protested against a provocative move by the Chinese Coast Guard. Reports indicate that a Chinese vessel attempted to block a mission to resupply the Philippine troops on a disputed island. However, the Philippines confirmed that it had successfully resupplied its troops. And on to sporting action now from the Asian Games. India clinched gold medal in men's hockey in the Hangzhou Asian Games. India defeated Japan 5-1 in the final and also qualified for the Paris Olympics. India men's hockey team outclassed 2018 champions Japan in the final to win the gold medal for the 4th time in the country's history. India equaled South Korea for second most gold in men's hockey after Pakistan, the most successful team with 8 gold medals. India won silver medal in men's team event in bridge. The Indian men's team, consisting of Raju Tolani, Ajay Prabhakar Kahare, Rajeshwar Tewari and Sumit Mukherjee, bagged silver. India, a gold and 2 bronze medal winner at the 2018 Jakarta Asian Games, lost to Hong Kong 152-238. In the gold medal match, the Indian bridge team outwitted Hong Kong, China 30-28 in the 3rd session on Thursday, but the rest of the 5 sessions belonged to Hong Kong. Now, Indian wrestler Sonam won bronze medal in women's 62 kg freestyle wrestling. Sonam defeated Chinese opponent with a clutch 2-pointer with seconds left in the bout. The two wrestlers were locked 4-4 and the Chinese was ahead on criteria. Sonam then effected a crucial takedown move with just 25 seconds left in the bronze playoff to emerge as 7-5 winner. So India is assured of 100 medals, which was the ambitious target for Indian sporting team. So with that, it's a wrap in this edition of DD India Global. Do join us tomorrow at 5 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter and Instagram at DD India Live. You can also find us online at ddindia.co.in. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from my entire team in New Delhi. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.